Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Lennon, and we're going to look at Unit 1E, which is just a few examples that kind of try to look at some real world situations and break them apart piece by piece in terms of some of the things we've looked at. Really just analyzing the situations and trying to think about them based on what the premise is, what the conclusion are, what are maybe some assumptions. So let's jump right in. So basically, yeah, almost every word problem, that's always the first advice they give. Read or listen carefully, look for hidden assumptions, identify the real issue, understand all the options, watch for fine print and missing information. Are other conclusions possible? So, while this is kind of true, usually, I mean, you can, if you're not under any sort of time constraints, it's a good idea to just go ahead and read through the problem. But sometimes I like to look at the questions first instead of read or listen carefully, and I think that's typically a good idea because the way we do things, a lot of times what we like to do is we like to kind of skim through and try and associate what things are actually going on. Like, a lot of times it might be easier to identify the conclusion before anything else, because typically it's based on some kind of action. So when you're scanning, if you're paying attention to that, then you can really understand what the issue is. So sometimes read the problem, but sometimes it's okay to look at the questions first and try and sift back through the information, because often keeping it all in your head is a little more difficult. So anyway, when they throw out these big grandiose plans when it comes to word problems, I mean, they're great about organizing the information, but I mean, typically we don't think in such a typical, straightforward way, and a lot of times things are written in such a way that it can be hard to deduce what's what until we kind of look at what we're trying to answer and sift backwards through. Anyway, let's look at an example here. Don't miss the big picture. Okay. Sorry, I forgot about one. Okay, analyze the following argument. So, we should build more prisons because incarcerating more criminals will reduce the crime rate. Okay, so this is one where basically the thing that they tell us first is actually what they want us to do, right? The action they want us to take is to build more prisons. So that's actually the consequence of what's going on here. And if you were thinking about, like, what are the assumptions are essentially incarcerating more criminals will reduce the crime rate. And you could think about hidden assumptions there. I suppose the chain of logic that they're not telling us, because that's a pretty simple premise to make, but it's really not straightforward, right? Somehow incarcerating more criminals will reduce the amount of criminals, and hence reducing the amount of criminals will reduce the crime rate. I suppose that's the chain of logic I see there. So write the argument as a conditional statement. We would write it kind of in the other order. If we incarcerate more criminals, then we will it will reduce the crime rate, and if we reduce more criminals, if we incarcerate more criminals, then we'll reduce the crime rate, and the action we should take is we should build more prisons to do that. Yeah, so the premise is actually that if we incarcerate more criminals, the crime rate will be reduced, and the conclusion is we should build more prisons. So pretty much exactly what we said, and we've got that chain of kind of hidden assumptions in there as well. So the hidden assumptions, the one we said, yeah, we should build more prisons because incarcerating more criminals will reduce the crime rate. Well, the first one I see is the hidden claim is that incarcerating more criminals will lead to less criminal behavior or less crime, and fewer criminals will reduce the crime rate. That's the basic chain of logic. Again, we're just trying to break apart what the actual argument is here. We're not really looking at the validity at this point, which you would have to look at, through some lens involving hopefully data and ways that would support that. And again, if this is, we've got all our different ideas in terms of logic based on being inductive or deductive that we looked at in previous units. So yeah, hidden assumption: if we build more prisons, then more criminals can be incarcerated. Sure. If we incarcerate more criminals, the crime rate will be reduced. If crime rate is reduced, we'll have a more desirable society. If a policy will lead to a more desirable society, then it should be enacted. Okay, so yeah, they found 3 hidden assumptions here. We were just primarily focusing more on the first one, but the second 2 are there, and some of them may be very, very obvious, or you wouldn't think of them. But yeah, if you break it down to basic ideas there, then yeah, this is kind of what we're talking about. And this is, making some arguments based on these assumptions. All right. Okay, yeah, but the conclusion's the same. So these are the hidden assumptions that are a little bit more refined than what I've been thinking. But anyway, that's kind of the argument unfolded. And again, when in its first writing, they kind of have it backwards, right, in terms of the conclusion and the premise as a if-then statement. Okay, in this example, analyze the following segment. All right, again. So we can read through it quickly. With last Saturday's sellout crowd at the Moonlight Amphitheater, it's clear that the parking problem has gotten worse. Concert goers parked along residential streets up to a mile away from the amphitheater, badly overcrowding sidewalks, blocking driveways, and disrupting traffic. In light of this parking problem, future concerts should be banned. Okay, well, there's your conclusion, this time coming at the end. They're asking us to ban future concerts. So that's the action. What is the premise? Well, it's kind of weird, right? Because the idea here is that it's happening because of one incident. So basically, right. The idea here is that concerts are causing traffic, and that's the only reason. That's the way it's written to make it sound, which necessarily might not be the case. It could have been a convergence of factors that I see. Also, banning future concerts based on what happened in one concert is not necessarily something that makes a whole lot of sense. There could be other solutions there. It doesn't seem to me that the evidence from one Saturday sellout crowd and what happened on that day is necessarily worthy of banning the entire venue. So yeah, a lot of times you'll see this in editorial pieces, as it's saying here, at a local paper. They'll use anecdotal evidence from one or a couple of examples, and they'll make a big inductive leap from there, which often can be a weak argument. So yeah, there's a parking problem for concerts at the theater, sure. And then the conclusion is ban all concerts, and then, that the problem goes away. Yeah, so future concerts must be banned. So that's the thing on its surface. Yeah, so the rest of the argument lists reasons about the parking problem is serious, but it actually only did it from one concert. Yeah. And then here again, is this incident actually a good enough reason? The parking problem could have a bunch of different solutions. Yeah, so here they list, different possible ways that could obviously change that. So, you could maybe have new parking lots, In addition to that, maybe there's the development of a parking garage, which could increase the space over a landscape vertically. rather than just having a single floor. That's a way that they often use to increase parking in, more urban environments based on the population density. They could have, enforce more parking violations to maybe reduce that problem, or encourage carpooling. A variety of other things that could potentially happen. The weakness of the argument should make us wonder whether the writers are really concerned about parking or whether they're using it to oppose themselves. So it would be, they could make the argument stronger by pointing to a lack of intervention by the venue itself over several instances, certain issues with zoning for parking lots. They could try to think about the solutions here, other potential solutions, and talk about why they would be invalid, and it would make things a lot stronger in terms of their line of reasoning. But the evidence that they gave is not substantial enough to make the argument sound really strong in my eyes. So what do they say here? Perhaps they're responding to a few vocal residents who complained. Hard to know for sure, but seems unlikely parking is the only issue. It seems like there's more layers to this onion that we should peel back, or at least be curious about. So, all right. One last example, I believe. So, Marshall was nearing retirement age and was concerned about his retirement savings. He thought the stock market was too risky, so he put his money into a CD at his local bank. Like most CDs, the one at his local bank was federally insured by the FDIC, but its interest rate was low. Then he heard about this offer. Our certificates of deposit have the highest interest rates. You got an asterisk there, so they always talk about reading the fine print. Our high yield counts come from our unique ability to invest in valuable offshore assets. Okay, you'll find anywhere more than double than most other banks for a combination of investment safety and high interest. There's no better choice. So his local bank is FDIC insured. That's the first thing you should go backwards. Recognize there. So that's definitely something that's important when you're thinking about putting money into something that is some type of investment vehicle. What is the history of it? What am I using it for? Things like that. Most people in the workforce invest in retirement through some type of IRA or lots of different things. But CDs tend to be something that people invest in as a very, very safe asset over a very long period of time. And so here in the italic offer, which is another financial vehicle, they don't talk about any type of insurance. They just say the word of combination of investment safety. They don't describe any way in which the investment is actually safe. So, they're advertising high rates, which maybe they could pull off over the short term, but maybe there's some other inherent problem with this investment option. So it would definitely be a good idea to dig deeper if you were the potential investor here. What happened? Marshall transferred all his savings into one of these high-yield CDs. 2 years later, the bank offering these CDs failed, and Marshall learned that he would not be able to recover any of his money. So the claim about investment safety turned out to not be true, and they didn't in any way qualify or quantify what they meant by investment safety. What happened? Okay, Marshall found he lost his retirement savings because, unlike most CDs, this one was not insured by the FDIC. So they said it was safe, but they didn't tell us why. Okay, Marshall should have wondered how one bank could possibly have offered a rate so much higher than that of other banks. Sure. Let the buyer beware, as they say in Latin. Caveat emptor. The fine print stating CDs were offshore could have been a clue for the fact that this was not a normal CD. They didn't say anything about insurance. They did claim it was safe, but they didn't say why. And again, yeah, so he should have inquired further. He should have dug more into what the details were. And yeah, when you're investing money, it's always a good idea to be suspicious and do your due diligence. Okay, so that's it with that example. So some real world examples that we tried to break down. So hopefully you found that kind of interesting. Anyway, this is it for chapter 1.